Good morning, ladies. I am back. I'm a bit tentative to say that because every time I've said that over the last 2 weeks, I've sort of woken up again feeling rough again. So I do feel 95% back to my normal self, which is just, I don't think I've ever been ill for that long length of time in my life. So anyway, the January blues, and today in particular 16th of January is Blue Monday, and Natalie asked a question in the group, how do you stay motivated around this time of year? And before I'm not going to just launch into ideas around ways in which we can make ourselves feel better, because I'm sure we all have a whole long list of things that we know that we shouldn't, that we could be doing that actually will help to combat a low mood. There's lots of things that influence this time of year, isn't it? But I want to look at it from a slightly different perspective. I want to look at it from the perspective of, when we put a label on something, when we label a certain day of the year as being Blue Monday, and of course they base that on evidence that they've collated over years, and I get that, but our brains do tend to work in a way where if we're told something, we tend to believe it, and how much of that does actually then influence the way we feel. It's almost that self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? So I kind of stepped back when I was starting to think about the January blues and Blue Monday and stuff like that. And I really think there's something that happens around the end of the year and the beginning of the year, even if you haven't set any New Year's resolutions, or there's kind of this shift that happens about out with the old and in with the new. And I think naturally for many of us, we start to reflect on our lives, and we certainly start to think about the things that we want to change. And I think there's something in that kind of feeds into like this slump. It almost is like, this ties into a lot of work that I've done on my own, like perception of, certainly when it came to losing weight and dieting. I lived most of my adult life believing that I wasn't good enough, and that I had to be on this constant conveyor belt of change, if you like. And even if I wasn't actually achieving the change that I wanted, the fact that I was thinking about it and telling myself I was doing those steps made me feel less inadequate in some ways. So I do think this Blue Monday thing and January slump in general, yes, of course, we've got darker nights, it's cold, we've got the whole kind of financial crisis that's going on. We've just come off the back of Christmas. We've spent more time with our families, which can be equally wonderful, but equally can be quite triggering for some of us as well. So there's lots of reasons why we may experience this slump, but I really think there's a lot tied in with this almost expectation of letting go of one year and what the new year brings. I'm in quite a lot of coaching groups, and there's a lot of language around let's smash 2023, let's make it the best year ever. There's this whole kind of almost competitiveness and almost quite addictive clicking into this massive drive. And so that kind of conflicts a little bit sometimes, because I don't know about you, naturally in the winter months, we are meant to hibernate, not like a bear does, but our natural, if you go back to cavemen days, they would have been in their cave when it was dark and they would be resting, so I kind of come at it more from how are we working against our natural way of being this time of year? We're meant to be closing the curtains and hankering down and getting to bed early, but our modern lifestyle very, very much works against that so much of the time. So I really think that plays a part in this dip that we experience in January, because often we start January with these ideas of change and being motivated and getting lots done, which actually works counterintuitively to the way our brain is actually designed to be at this time of year. So it's nature and nurture working against each other. So Natalie, you might be surprised to hear that I'm not going to click you into like ways in which to stay motivated. I'm very much more coming from the camp of Where are you maybe placing too much expectation on yourself at this time of year? Because that's very much encouraged, you know, out with the old, in with the new. It's the time of year to like really kind of go for it. But actually when we start to recognize that sometimes that actually generates this like rub, and it's really hard. And of course, when we don't feel motivated and we're unable to get traction and do the things that we say we want to do, we then label that and judge that, and we fall off the wagon. And I'm not just talking about diets here, I'm talking about all these different things that we often try to change in January. So many people are like doing the dry January and stuff like that. And this isn't a judgment. Everyone has to do what they feel they want to do. But, you know, going in, making a decision to remove something from your life at a time when your mood is likely to be at a lower ebb just because of the time of the year, kind of makes it really difficult for ourselves. So it's really interesting how we choose these pivotal points in the year to start making changes, to kind of like talk ourselves into logically thinking that if we do X, Y, and Z, we're going to feel better, which in a way we do. But actually, when we start to look at how are we working against our natural body rhythm. So, you know, for me, it's about slowing down. It's about, you know, not being so, putting so much pressure on ourselves to be making all of these new changes at a time where actually we should be like hankering down and just kind of just going through our day. That's not to say don't focus on building a really good wellness plan for yourself. So those, you know, don't make sweeping changes. You know, the foundations, make sure you're getting your sleep, make sure you're drinking your water, make sure you're getting out walking, make sure that you're having connection to other people. All of these little things, think about food, think about movement, think about mindset, think about self-care, but not in this massive making big changes. You know, these little steps every single day that just kind of keep you on that even keel. Get to bed a bit earlier, you know, snuggle down with a good book. Little things that actually are more aligned with the time of the year, rather than putting this pressure on yourself to be getting up in the dark and going to the gym and kind of creating quite a out of kilter routine for yourself, which then we're naturally going to resist against it. So that's my thoughts on Blue Monday. You know, I do think there are elements of it that are absolutely true and do exist. I do think that labelling the month of January as a time where most people fall off their wagon, fall off the dieting wagon or whatever they're trying to change, or most people feel depressed or whatever. I do think there is a degree of that. Of course there is, and there'll be statistics that support that, but I do think we put a label on something and that starts to create almost a story in our unconscious that that's how it is. But I do also think it doesn't take into account our natural body clock, our natural body rhythms, and how, you know, winter months are meant to be closing down and being more sort of like that hibernation kind of mode, ready to rest and then bring ourselves out in the springtime. But you know, the way we live now, we've got lights, so we don't have this like these distinct day and nights anymore. So nature and nurture are constantly fighting against each other. So I would say, you know, just go with the seasons. You know, go with what the time of the year is actually meant to be. You know, look for where you're actually creating this conflict. And that's not to say don't take these small steps that are going to make you feel better, but part of it is actually doing less. Part of it is accepting that this time of the year has these natural tendencies to be quieter, you know, and if we label that quiet time as a depression, then that has associations connected to it, if that makes sense.